The street was noisy that afternoon, horns blaring, shopkeepers calling out to customers, and the usual rush of people passing by. But amidst all the clamor, one voice rose above the rest. It wasn't the sound of laughter, nor the cheerful tone of a vendor. It was harsh, sharp, and cutting. A woman stood outside a small bakery, scolding a frail little girl with words so cruel they seemed to pierce the air. "You useless child! Can't you do anything right? Always making mistakes, always embarrassing me." The girl, no more than 7 or 8, kept her head down. Her small hands trembled as she tried to hold a tray of bread rolls that were almost too heavy for her. She was thin, her clothes old and worn, her eyes filled with tears she was desperately holding back. Passers-by looked at her, some with pity, some with indifference, but none stopped. None except one man, a tall, well-dressed gentleman in his early 40s, wearing a suit that instantly marked him as wealthy, had just stepped out of his car across the street. His name was Daniel Carter, a self-made millionaire known in the business world for his sharp mind and relentless drive. But more than his wealth, he was known among those close to him for having a heart that could never ignore pain, especially when it came from injustice. Daniel froze as he saw the scene. He couldn't take his eyes off the trembling little girl and the way the woman spat insult after insult at her, as though the child was nothing but a burden. Something deep inside him stirred, a memory from long ago. He remembered being a small boy himself, sitting on the cold floor of a foster home, listening to harsh words that told him he was worthless, that he would never amount to anything. He had fought hard to escape that life, to prove everyone wrong. And now, seeing that same cruelty directed at a helpless little girl, it broke something inside him. Without hesitation, Daniel crossed the street, his long strides carrying him straight toward the scene. The woman was still shouting, "If it weren't for me, you'd be starving on the streets. Do you understand that? You're nothing without me." Daniel's voice rang out firmly, cutting through her rant. "That's enough." The woman spun around, startled, her face flushed with both anger and embarrassment at being confronted. The little girl looked up timidly, her wide eyes glistening as she saw this stranger standing tall, his presence like a shield between her and the harsh words. "Who are you to interrupt me?" The woman snapped. Daniel looked at her with unwavering calm. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that no child deserves to be treated this way. Not ever." The crowd that had gathered began to murmur. Some nodded, some simply watched in silence. But the girl, she clung to the edge of her tray, staring at Daniel with the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. For the first time, someone had spoken up for her. From that moment on, Daniel couldn't get the little girl out of his mind. He soon learned her name was Emily. Her parents had died in an accident years ago, and she had been taken in by a distant relative who cared more about free labor than about raising a child. Emily was forced to work long hours, serving customers, cleaning, and doing chores far beyond her years. If she made even the smallest mistake, she was scolded, insulted, and sometimes denied food. Daniel's heart ached as he listened to her story. He knew pain like that. It was the kind that left scars invisible to the eye but heavy on the soul. He began visiting her secretly, at first bringing her food, small gifts, and books. Emily was shy, unsure if she could trust this stranger. But Daniel was patient. He would sit with her and tell her stories, sometimes about his childhood struggles, sometimes about the dreams he once thought impossible. Slowly, Emily began to open up, her laughter returning in small doses, her eyes shining just a little brighter. But change never comes without challenges. The woman who cared for Emily grew suspicious. She accused Daniel of interfering and threatened to forbid him from ever coming near the child again. Worse still, she began treating Emily even more harshly, punishing her whenever she suspected Daniel had visited. Daniel realized that simply showing kindness wasn't enough. Emily needed rescue. She needed a real chance at life. Yet the process was not easy. Legal battles began. The woman refused to let go, insisting that Emily belonged to her. Daniel faced endless hearings, paperwork, and even public criticism. Some questioned his motives, whispering that maybe he was only helping Emily for publicity. Others doubted whether a busy millionaire could ever truly care for a child who wasn't his own. Through it all, Emily's spirit was tested too. She often cried, afraid that she would never escape. But Daniel never wavered. Every time she wanted to give up, he would kneel in front of her, look into her tearful eyes, and say, "Emily, you are not worthless. You are strong, and I promise I will fight for you until the very end." Finally, after months of struggle, the court made its decision. Emily would no longer be in the custody of her cruel guardian. Instead, Daniel was granted guardianship with the option to adopt her. The moment the judge announced the ruling, Emily threw her tiny arms around Daniel's neck, sobbing into his shoulder. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. If life after that was not magically perfect, Emily had years of wounds, fear, doubt, and insecurity that didn't vanish overnight. But Daniel was patient, just as someone once had been patient with him when he was young. He encouraged her education, supported her dreams, and gave her the one thing she had always craved: unconditional love. Slowly, Emily transformed. The little girl who once trembled under insults grew into a confident young girl who smiled, laughed, and dared to dream. She discovered a love for painting, and Daniel proudly hung her artwork in his home. Every brushstroke was a symbol of healing, every color a sign of hope reborn. And through it all, Daniel learned too. Though he had wealth, houses, and cars, nothing compared to the joy of seeing Emily's face light up. She had filled a space in his heart that money never could.